Hi friends, it's Shari. Today I have a fun set of Swivel surprise cards to share with you. Each of these cards uses the same sort of card recipe, but we're going to make 3 different cards today. I'm starting with Spiffy Speckles paper and some stencils for my backgrounds on the covers of the cards. So I have green, teal, and pink, and I've picked out a stencil for each of the colors. Today I'm making a Valentine's card with the pink, a birthday card with the green, and a thank you card with the blue. So I'm starting out with the pink Spiffy Speckles, and I've used the largest of the small stitched rectangles to cut out a panel so we have that nice stitching detail around the sides. And when I put this on a card base, I'm going to get a nice white border around all 4 sides as well. Now for this, I'm using the layered heart stencil, and I'm starting out with Peachy Keen ink, which is a really light peachy pink color. I'm doing this first stencil, this is stencil number 1, to get my initial hearts on the background. Next, I'm moving on to stencil number 2, and you can see I'm just using my magnets to hold my stencils in place on my magnetic glass mat, and I'm using some guava ink for the second set of hearts. Now this stencil does have 3 hearts to make a line of hearts all the way across that are layered over each other, but I'm going to stick with just the 2, so I have these cute little pairs of hearts. Now I'm moving on to the green Spiffy Speckles panel. This is cut with that same stitched rectangle, so everything's going to be the same size. And I'm using the bamboo stencils for this one. I'm starting out with celery stick ink, which is my lightest green, and doing the main stalks of the bamboo. This one's going to have pandas, so that's why I'm using the bamboo for this one. And I'm just going all over with that celery stick ink to get that bamboo onto the background. Then I can pull out stencil number 2, which is the little nodes on the stalks of the bamboo. For this one, I'm using freshly cut grass, which is a little bit darker. And this will just make those little nodes on the stalks stand out a little bit more. Once I have all of those little spaces filled in with that freshly cut grass, I can move on to the third stencil in the set, which is the leaves on the bamboo. And these stencils, of course, have some etching lines on them, so they're easy to line up, especially these leaves. It's easy to see where those bamboo stalks are to get those leaves in the right placement. For the leaves, I'm using a darker green that is a little less yellowy in color, which is clover. And I just switched brushes there. That little one was taking a little bit longer than I wanted and putting down a little bit more ink than I wanted at that top leaf up there. So I just switched to a bigger brush and I'm just filling in all those leaves in that clover, and I love the way that looks. Next up, we're going to be a little unconventional with this background. This is the Strawberry Fields stencils. This is my first time using this one actually. This one was really fun, but I wanted to continue with that tone on tone look, and we have that kind of teal colored spiffy speckles. So we're going to use some teal colors and make some blue strawberries. So I'm starting out with Mermaid, which is my lightest shade of ink. And I'm doing the main part of the strawberries. This one is a 4-part stencil set. So I'm using stencil number 1, that's the body of the strawberries. Stencil number 2 is the tops of the strawberries, and I'm just using those etching lines to line those up with the strawberries I already inked. And then I've pulled out some peacock ink, which is a little bit darker than the mermaid, and we're going to color in the tops of the strawberries with that peacock ink. So now moving on to stencil number 3. This one is the little flowers in between the strawberries. For this one, I'm going back to that mermaid ink so that they are the same color as my strawberries. I am going to pull out a smaller brush so I can get in those little detail areas a little bit better. And then moving on to stencil number 4. This one fills in the center of those little flowers. So I'm going to go back to my peacock ink and use that for the centers. And the reason I'm using this small brush is I'm going to use a third color for the seeds of the strawberries. So this is Rainforest, which is just a bit darker, and that will be the seeds of my strawberries. So my strawberries will have 3 shades of ink, and my little flowers have 2. And I just think this turned out really pretty with that tone-on-tone strawberry background. While I have all my backgrounds here, I'm just going to splatter them all at the same time with some gold metallic watercolor and also some white metallic watercolor. And I know you can't see it right now, but I'll pick these up and move them around in the light so you can see that shimmer that I got from those metallic watercolor splatters. I always love the subtle shimmer that these splatters like this give to a background. Now, for each of my sentiments, I've picked out a giant sentiment. So we have hooray, XOXO, and thank you. And I'm going to cut each of these out of a solid cardstock that contrasts with my background. So I have some peacock cardstock, some mermaid cardstock, and some guava cardstock for those three sentiments. And I just love how these big sentiments really fill the space. And since the exciting part of our card is going to be on the inside, we can keep the fronts a little more simple. So since I'm making swivel surprises, I do have side folding card bases for all of my cards today. And I'm just going to go ahead and put these backgrounds onto my card bases. And you can see with that stitch rectangle, we get that nice white border around the sides, which is beautiful to frame up these backgrounds that we created. Now, this is a great idea if you want some simple cards and you don't want to make swivel surprises. The ideas for these fronts would be great just as a card on their own. For each of the sentiments, I used some thin foam strips, put them all over the back of the words so that my sentiment pops up off that background and has some really nice dimension. Of course, for the giant hooray, we can't forget the little dot at the bottom of the exclamation point. And then here are my big bold sentiments. Now let's talk about the images. We're using some How You Bean strawberries and sweet strawberry for the thank you card. I have I Heart Pandas and the I Heart Panda add-on for the birthday card. And then for my Valentine's card, I am using Milk and Cookies, which is an oldie but a goodie, and I'll explain a little more why I picked that for my Valentine card. For my images, I'm going to stamp something for the front as well as something for the inside. And since the panda card is a birthday card, I did pull in all the party hats for some party hat fun and all the smiles because of these cute little birthday cakes. And I've been using these two sets a lot lately to create birthday cards because you can just add these to any critter and you magically have a birthday card. For my strawberries, I stamped 2 of the sweet strawberry and lots of that little individual strawberry from How You Bean. And then for my milk and cookies, I have a few cookies here. I am going to stamp the little face that comes in the set, but the face for the one with the bite taken out was kind of grumpy looking, and I realized I have all the smiles sitting here, so I should just pick a new smile. And in hindsight, I wish I'd picked that one with glasses because my husband wears glasses, and that would be perfect for this Valentine card. And of course, for that third cookie, I'm just going to add more chocolate chips. There is a stamp in Milk and Cookies where you can add chocolate chips if you don't want to add a face. So now that everything is stamped out in jet black ink, I can do some coloring with my Copic markers. Now, I will say right now that that R35 that I'm using is dried out, and I did not realize how empty it was, and I did not have a refill on hand. So you're going to see me go over that color a lot, but luckily I have a refill on order and will soon have a nice juicy marker again. But I colored the shadow, that darker color, along the bottom and the side, and you're going to see I'm pulling it back in once I went over it with that light color, just to make these strawberries a bit more red. I'll do the same thing for the big strawberries on the part that you see above the dipped chocolate. So I have that dark color underneath the cap, and then I'll blend out with the lighter color. And then for the caps of my strawberries, I'm using YG05. I'm going all over with that color, and then I'm going to come back with a darker color and just add a little bit of shading, which is kind of the opposite that I normally do. I was going to do a lighter color and blend out, but I thought that this worked better for the colors that I wanted. So I went in with that darker green, and now I'm just kind of blending out those harsh lines that I created. Now for the big strawberries, these are dipped in chocolate, so I'm going to create a milk chocolate strawberry and a white chocolate strawberry. And I stamped each of the different faces in these as well so that I have two different strawberries. While I have my browns out that I use for my chocolate, I'm going to use the same ones for my cookies. Just some quick shadow at the bottom and then the lighter color. I don't want to make them too dark because I don't want to lose the details of the faces. Now for my milk carton, I really love coloring this milk carton like in two tones to where the bottom is one color and the top is another. I did decide to do that little flap at the top with that same teal color. And then I want this to be sort of white or a creamy color. So I'm using my E000 and my E00. And then for the cookie jar, I'm using those same reds I used for the strawberries. So me and my husband had milk and cookies as our theme for our wedding because his name is Matt that starts with M like milk and Shari starts with a C like cookies. And I just thought it was so cute. So that is why I am making a Valentine with the milk and cookie set. There is that cute little solid heart in this set, which I just love to add to the milk carton. And then there's also a cute little striped straw that I'm going to stamp in guava ink. Now onto my pandas and all their fun birthday hats. I have some little bamboo I'm coloring there that I did use some of, and then you're gonna see what happened when I tried to use it on the inside of the card. We're gonna talk about that later. I of course have that birthday cake with some fun pink icing, and I colored the bottom like it is a yellow cake. Then I'm just using various colors for my little party hats to add some pops of color to this card. I'm not doing any shading on the hats, just straight color on these little party hats. And for this solid one, I felt like it was a little too plain compared to the other two, so I actually added some pink at the bottom, and then I'm going to grab my really, really fine multi-liner, Copic multi-liner, and add a little stripe detail at the bottom. Then, of course, I have that little butterfly that I'm just going to color yellow because I think that's a nice contrast to some of the other colors on this card. And then for my pandas, I'm actually going to pull out the coloring stencils and just give them a little bit of ink, a little bit of shadow. These are great for this, especially pandas because they're white and we don't want to do too much coloring. So I'm pulling out Lost Shadow Distress ink, which is that very pale gray, and I'm going to be very light-handed. I'm going to tap off my ink and I'm just going to dust the outside edges. And you can see how that gives them a little bit of shading, but yet they're still white. So when I pull the stencil away, you can really tell the difference between the top pandas that I've already shaded and the bottom guy that I'm shading now. And then I'm adding some little pink cheeks to them with my Copic marker, and I'm ready to cut everything out with the coordinating dies. So I'm going to start by adding my images to the front of my cards. So for that thank you card with the strawberry theme, I'm using a few of those individual strawberries to sprinkle around my sentiment. You don't need to get too fancy. That sentiment is kind of the star of the show, and also you don't want to cover up the beautiful stenciling in the background. Now for my Valentine card, I'm putting the cookies on the front. So I have that little one that's just plain with chocolate chips. He's going to go at the bottom. And then I have my little cookie couple up above my sentiment. This is where I realized it would have been really cute to have the cookie with the bite taken out of with the glasses like my husband. Now I did feel like this one was a little empty because the sentiment is smaller. So I'm taking that solid little teeny tiny heart from the milk and cookie set and some guava ink and just adding a little sprinkling of tiny little hearts, and I just think that is so cute. Now for my birthday card, I'm going to layer this panda over top of the sentiment. Of course, I need to add his little party hat so he is ready for a birthday party. And then I'm also going to take one of those little bamboo pieces and add that as well. I wasn't sure where I wanted my butterfly. I'm going to set him aside for the moment. I do want this little panda to hold something so he's not just sitting there with his hands empty. So I'm adding that little bamboo. And then I'm going to take the other little bamboos and I just ended up tucking a few into the sentiment. And I just thought that added a little something extra to the little images. And then for my butterfly, I'm going to have this one kind of off the top of this O. So I did put a little bit of foam underneath him to support the top of that butterfly. So there are all the fronts. And as I said before, if you didn't want to make a swivel surprise, these are some great cards. But we're going to make some swivel surprises. So I've cut the mechanism from white as well as that little rectangular piece with the X. And then for the circles and the rings, I've cut these from some spiffy speckles, or you can see I have that peacock cardstock for my pandas so that they stand out. And I've also cut a few of those curved banners that comes in the swivel surprise. I'm going to put sentiments on those too, but for the strawberries, I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the big circle. Now the ring does cut out that inner circle. I'm not sure that I want to use those, so I'm just going to set those aside. The first thing I want to do is stamp my sentiments, and I need to curve these to match that sentiment banner. So I've just stuck them to the block, laid my block on top of that banner, and then I'm just curving that sentiment to match. And once I have it on the block properly, I can stamp that onto my sentiment banner. Sorry about my head being in the way. You do kind of have to get right over it to see what you're doing. Now that one was pretty easy to curve. This one was a little more difficult because they're on rectangles, but it actually turned out fine in the end. What I did was I picked them up with the block straight, and then I worked on curving them around the curve. Now I started out with just the happy birthday, but I wanted to fill the banner a little bit more. So the original I Heart Panda set has the have a, and then happy birthday comes from the add-on, and that whole sentiment fits perfectly onto this curved banner. So again, sorry about my head, I just need to get it lined up, but I'm trying to move my head so you can see me stamp it. So if you haven't noticed already, I'm kind of doing things in batches. So now I'm going to move on to those center circles for all the swivel surprises. For the pandas, I cut this from peacock cardstock to match the sentiment on the front of the card. Of course, I'm adding that little panda couple, the other little party hats, and then I'm going to put a cake in front of them. And that's all I'm going to do on this little circle because my sentiment banner is going to go on the ring. Now, you see me putting this on the ring now. I'm also going to add some images to this, but you're going to see that I really shouldn't have done that. So I'm going to keep my mistake in here so that hopefully you don't make the same one. And we're going to talk about that when the time comes. So you can see I'm looking at little images to put around that circle, but right now I'm going to move on to my strawberries. So for these, I decided to take two different spiffy speckles papers. So the circle is the teal color, and the ring that's going to go behind will be the pink color, and I just flip-flopped those colors for my milk and cookies. This is the one where I want to stamp my sentiment on the circle, and so the front says thank you, and the inside will say so very much. And instead of cutting apart my sentiment, I'm just selectively inking the sentiment. So I'm stamping so berry, then I'm going to clean it off and only ink up the word much so that I can stamp these on two separate lines. And this is going to kind of follow the placement of my strawberries because I don't want them right beside each other. I kind of want one higher and one a little bit lower. Now I did feel like this one needed a few more embellishments around it. So there is a little heart in the Sweet Strawberry set. It's a little open heart and some guava ink, and I'm just going to stamp those around my little strawberries. So this one is going to go on this pink ring. Now here is where I wish I had kind of checked my swivel surprise first. I glued these strawberries around that ring, which would have been fine on a square card, but on this card, they ended up sticking out the side of my card when it was closed. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit and how I changed things up. But first, let's finish our inside circles. So I have my milk and cookies. I'm adding that cute little striped straw to the back of the milk carton, and then I'll glue these two together on the center of my circle. Once I got them glued on there, I felt like this one needed a little bit more, so I took the little single cookie in the stamp set, the one that sits on the plate, and colored that, and I thought that just finished this little composition off perfectly. And of course, that tiny little heart, and this kind of makes it look like it's a continuation of the front even more because I stamped that little heart on the front panel. So the ring that goes behind the milk and cookies is that teal spiffy speckles. I am going to glue this sentiment on there, but just like the strawberries, I ended up gluing hearts around this ring and had the same problem. So again, I wish I had remembered or checked it beforehand to make sure it didn't stick out the side of the card, but it did. So it's a great idea in theory, but it did not work for my specific card design. So I will show you exactly how I fix all this here in just a little bit. But you can see here, I had stuff glued around all the rings, which is really cute, right? So now let's work on the swivel surprise mechanism. This crazy looking piece that the die cuts has some score lines, so we need to fold on all of those and reinforce them with the bone folder. So there is one across the top that's straight, then there are two that go through the center at a diagonal and create an X. Then there is a straight one that goes through the center of the X, so we want to fold on that as well and reinforce that with our bone folder. So we have the X and the one through the center, and then there is one here on this little tab, and this is how we're going to connect this to the other side of our card. So once we have all of these, you want to push in the middle of the X, push those in, and it's going to kind of fold down onto itself. And you can reinforce that little fold with the bone folder as well to make it nice and crisp. I'll open this up and show you again. You kind of push on that horizontal line in the middle of the X, and they're just going to fold down into each other. So I've gone ahead and folded all of my mechanisms for all three of my cards, and let's start to put one together. So we're going to flip it over, and you have this little space that looks like a house. There's a rectangle and a triangle on top, and we're just going to put adhesive just on the rectangle. So right where I am coloring it in with my pencil. And you want to use a nice strong adhesive here. So I'm going to use the 1/4 inch tape, and I'm going to put 2 pieces across this. And I'm using 2 so that it completely covers that little rectangle. Now I can pull off the liner paper. Then I'm going to flip this over, and I'm opening up my card, making sure it's right side up. And I'm going to line up the edge of my mechanism with the inside fold and then stick that down. Now the other side is just loose for the moment because we need to put our ring across it. And I'm putting adhesive on that bottom little piece that matches the curve of the ring. And I'm sliding my ring over the mechanism, and I'm going to glue it down, and then I'm going to test it. And here is where I saw that those little images go out past the edge of my card. As you can see there, that little bamboo is creating a problem. Now that is the smallest problem of all my problems. So here's where I decided I needed to rethink this because look, when I put my strawberries here, oh, it's even worse. All right, so I've abandoned ship on those 3 rings and I am starting over. So I cut them all, and what I decided to do was to stamp the images and create a pattern. So I'm using the strawberry and some guava ink, and I'm just going to stamp all around that ring. So basically making my own custom pattern paper. I'm also going to dust the edges of the ring just to kind of define it a little and make it stand out. And I'm going to do the same thing for all 3 rings. For my milk and cookies, I'm actually stamping the 2 hearts. So there is this larger heart that is open. I'm stamping that all around. And then I'm going to pull in that teeny tiny heart that I've stamped everywhere because I love it so much. And I'm going to fill in between my big hearts. I did actually forget to dust the edges of this one with the ink at first, but I will get back to that. I won't forget. They are all going to match. Now for my green one, of course, we're going to use the bamboo, and I used the leaves that I had used for my colored images, but I also used the tiny little bamboo stalk that you can use for the pandas to hold. I thought that was a fun way to kind of add the stalk of the bamboo into this pattern that I'm creating. And then I will dust the edges of this with my green, And you're going to see I'm going to go back and dust the edges of the teal with the mermaid ink. So I use guava on the pink, freshly cut grass on the green, and mermaid on the teal. All right, now I don't have the problem of things sticking out anymore, so I'm going to go back to the card I already started. I just pulled off the ring, and now I can add my ring that doesn't have anything sticking out from the sides. So that adhesive is still on that bottom little funny shaped piece that matches the ring, and I'm just lining up the shape of that piece to my ring, and I'll just stick it down. And now when I do this, I have nothing sticking out the edge of my card. Now, if my card had been wider, none of this would have been a problem. But now we need to move on to this little rectangular piece that has a score line and an X. So you want to fold it on that score line, making a little chair. We're going to add liquid glue to that little triangle I just marked there, and that's where the two X's line up. So you want to put the X of the little chair on the X on the mechanism, and then you want to be sure that you're patient and you hold this here while that glue sets. Once that glue's set, I'm going to make sure everything's working the way it should. There we go. And then I can add my big circle with my pandas to that little chair piece. So you want to fold up the chair like the bottom of the chair, and that's where we want to put our adhesive. I'm going to draw an X here so you know exactly where to put it, and a little piece of double-sided tape will do the trick. Then I'm going to pull off that liner paper from that little piece of tape. Make sure that this is in the open position, and the best way to tell that it is if that little knife piece is sticking up at the top, it is in the open position. And then you can add the big circle to the center, making sure it is straight and upright. So when you push it in, it's going to go crooked and to the side, and then this is the open position. So everything's working really well. Now I have ignored that little knife-shaped piece at the top, and we're going to address that here in just a little bit because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do to all those just yet. I wanted to get my swivel surprise put together, and then I made some decisions on what to do with that little third element. Of course, I'm adding my sentiment, again, making sure it's in that pulled out position so that it goes into the right place when we open the card. So finally, we need to attach the tab on the left side to the back of the front of the card or the inside of the front, and we're adding 2 pieces of tape to that little tab. You want to make sure it's in that closed position, so push it all the way to the right. Pull off that liner paper, and all you have to do at this point is close your card, and it will end up in the perfect placement. And look at that, it's so much fun. So we're gonna deal with that little piece at the top here in just a minute. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and assemble all 3 of my swivel surprises in the exact same way that you saw me do the pandas. I'm gonna speed it up a little bit just so you can see the process, but in fast time. So we have our ring added onto the bottom piece. We're going to add that little chair, lining up the X's, using liquid glue and making sure we kind of hold it in place till that glue sets a little bit. If you move it before it's set, things are going to fall off. Ask me how, I know. And then once that glue's set, we can add some double-sided tape to the little bottom of the chair. And then we're going to add our milk and cookies to the center. And this one also has that curved sentiment banner that I stamped. We're going to add that to the ring. And everything's working well. So the last thing we need to do is attach it to the other side of the card. So we have that double-sided tape on that little tab. Pull off that liner paper, make sure everything's pushed over, and then close the card. And then one more time, we're going to do the same thing on the berry card. So we have the adhesive on the rectangular part of the little house on the back. We're going to add adhesive to that bottom part where we add our ring. Then we can add our little chair piece with some liquid glue. Hold that in place, make sure it is nice and set. And we're going to make sure everything's working properly. And this is where I'm like, what do I want to put up here at the top? Maybe some strawberries so they pop out? Because I have all these strawberries, I cut them off the ring that didn't work, and of course I want to use them so that I don't waste them. Now my adhesive is set, my liquid glue is set, I can add my center circle. Everything's working well, and then we can add this to the other side of the card so that it is attached and it works properly. Close the card, pick that up, everything's working good. Okay, it's now time to address the little knife-shaped piece at the top. So for the strawberries, I did decide to use the circle that the die creates out of the center of the ring and add my strawberries directly to the circle. So I'm adding a couple of those little strawberries to the circle, making sure I stay inside that circle so I don't create any more problems. And then I have one I'm adding to the bottom. I had a couple more trying to figure out where I wanted them. I decided to just leave it at 3, and then it matches the outside. Now for the milk and cookies, I decided to add a die cut heart. This is a very large heart from the Hearts die set, and I did have to trim down that little knife-shaped piece and do a little experimenting to make sure my heart was in the right place to where it would close. So that's a good spot for it right there. And I used tape runner so I could move it around, but I still need to trim off that knife-shaped piece a little bit, and then we have that cute little heart that pops up. Now for my pandas, I decided I didn't actually want anything here. I thought about the butterfly and decided just to add that to my circle. And this is in such a place that it will not be a problem because it's going to go down towards the bottom. I decided to keep this one simple and just trim that off. So I drew a little guideline where the circle is and trimmed it off at that line. So here are my 3 swivel surprise cards. So we have our hooray birthday card, which I think is so cute with those little pandas. And this is kind of the simple version without a third element inside. We have our Valentine card with the XOXO and the cute little milk and cookies with that little heart that pops up. So that's kind of a shaped piece that's popping up. And then we have our thank you card with the traditional circle at the top with those cute little strawberries. And I really love those blue strawberries in the stencil background. So here are a few more looks at the cards I created today in the video. I hope this has inspired you to look at your supplies and use this card recipe to make cards for any and all occasions. The Swivel Surprise has endless possibilities for all kinds of cards. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.